Picture this. It's May 2nd, 1982. An aging cruiser is steaming through the South Atlantic, surrounded by destroyers, carrying over 1,000 men. She's nearly 40 years old. She's already survived one of the most catastrophic naval attacks in history. She's outlasted empires, changed hands between navies, and somehow kept going decade after decade. And then 2 torpedoes from a British submarine ended her story for good. But here's the thing, and this is what gets me every single time. The story of that ship is so much bigger, so much wilder, and so much more fascinating than just those final minutes in the South Atlantic. Because before she was the General Belgrano, before she was the most famous or infamous, depending on who you ask about her being a casualty of the Falklands War, she was the USS Phoenix. And the USS Phoenix was at Pearl Harbor. Welcome back to Jackson Talks channel. Today we are doing a full cradle-to-grave breakdown of one of the most extraordinary ships of the 20th century. A ship that survived Pearl Harbor, served 2 navies, fought in 2 different conflicts under 2 different flags, and became the center of one of the biggest political controversies in British post-war history. Born in the USA, now get that song out of your head if you can, I give you the USS Phoenix. Let's go back to the beginning. We're talking 1935. Franklin D. Roosevelt is in the White House, swing music is playing on the radio, and the United States Navy is in the middle of building some seriously impressive light cruisers. The Phoenix CL-46 was a Brooklyn-class light cruiser that was laid down by the New York Shipbuilding Corporation in Camden, New Jersey in April 1935. She was launched in March 1938 and commissioned into the US Navy in October of that same year. Now, the Brooklyn class were considered a big deal at the time. The United States had been eyeing Japanese cruiser designs, with the kind of nervous energy you feel when someone at a party turns up with a better car than you. The Japanese Mogami-class cruisers were armed with 15 6-inch guns, and America decided that's just not acceptable, thank you very much, and went about designing a class that could match that firepower. The Brooklyn class came out swinging, 15 6-inch guns in 5 triple turrets, 4 times twin 5-inch gun mounts, torpedoes, anti-aircraft armament, and at around 10,000 tons displacement, she was a proper, capable fighting warship. The Phoenix was about 608 feet long, could make around 32 knots, and carried a crew of roughly 1,200 men. She was, in short, a serious piece of naval engineering. The Americans weren't messing about. The late 1930s were her early service years. She undertook routine operations such as training exercises and flying the flag across the Pacific, pretty standard peacetime stuff. Then December 7th, 1941 happened, and nothing was pleasant anymore. Pearl Harbor, the day that changed everything. Now look, if you've watched this channel for more than 5 minutes, you know I don't shy away from the big moments. And Pearl Harbor is about as big as it gets when it comes to Second World War naval history. December 7th, 1941, the Japanese carrier strike force, Kido Butai, launches 353 aircraft in 2 waves against the US Pacific Fleet anchored at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It's a Sunday morning. Most people are asleep, or at breakfast, or just going about their business. It's chaos from the first bombs dropping. Now, when people talk about Pearl Harbor, they talk about Battleship Row, the Arizona blowing up, the Oklahoma capsizing, the West Virginia and California sinking. It's the battleships that dominate the narrative, and with good reason they were the most devastating losses. But here's where our girl, the Phoenix, comes in. The Phoenix was moored at the Navy Yard, slightly removed from the main carnage at Battleship Row, and crucially this turned out to be rather good news for her continued existence. She was not in the primary line of fire. When the attack began, her crew scrambled to battle stations. They put up anti-aircraft fire. They were in the middle of one of the most shocking moments in American naval history, and when the smoke cleared and the Japanese aircraft turned for home, the Phoenix was still afloat. Completely undamaged, not a scratch. Now, I want you to think about what that means for a second. Out of all the ships at Pearl Harbor, the Phoenix emerged from the attack without a single significant hit. In a strike that sank or damaged 19 US Navy vessels, killed 2,403 Americans, and wounded nearly 1,200, the Phoenix sailed out of it unscathed. Some sailors are lucky and some ships are legendarily lucky. The Phoenix was clearly this class. In fact, there's an almost poetic irony here. The name Phoenix, the mythological bird that rises from the ashes, that cannot be destroyed, that keeps coming back. Right? So having cheated death before breakfast on December 7th, what did the Phoenix do next? She got to work, and she had quite a war. The Phoenix served extensively in the Pacific theater throughout World War II. She was involved in operations across the Southwest Pacific, working under the command of General Douglas MacArthur, yes, that Douglas MacArthur, as part of the 7th Fleet. She was part of the New Guinea campaign, supporting the amphibious landings, doing all the things a light cruiser in wartime is supposed to do. She was at the Battle of Surigao Strait in October 1944, during the broader Battle of Leyte Gulf, which, for those keeping score, was the largest naval battle in history by the number of ships involved. So yeah, she was there for that too. Throughout the war, the Phoenix earned herself 11 battle stars. That's not a ship sitting around in a harbor polishing its anchor. That's a warship actually in the fight, earning its keep, with a crew doing their jobs under extraordinarily dangerous circumstances. By the time the war ended in 1945, the Phoenix had compiled a genuinely impressive combat record, survived Pearl Harbor, fought across the Pacific, multiple major engagements, 11 battle stars. She was a veteran in every sense of the word. And then, with the war over and the US Navy suddenly finding itself with more warships than it needed, the Phoenix faced the fate of many wartime veterans. She was decommissioned in 1946 as she was surplus to requirements. Thanks for your service, and into mothballs you go. But this is where the story gets really interesting. Going south and joining the Argentine Navy. Now, after World War II, a lot of American warships found new homes in Allied navies under various military assistance programs. The US had this tremendous industrial capacity and a load of ships it didn't need anymore. Countries, particularly in Latin America, were looking to build up or modernize their navies. Argentina was one of those countries. In 1951, the Argentine Navy purchased the Phoenix from the United States. She was transferred to Argentina, recommissioned, and renamed ARA 17 de Octubre, which means the 17th of October, which was a significant date in Argentine Peronist politics, not the most subtle of names. Then, in 1955, there was a military coup in Argentina, one of several in the country's rather turbulent 20th century political history, and the Peronist government was overthrown. The new military government, not surprisingly, wasn't keen on sailing around in a ship named after a Peronist holiday, so she was renamed again. This time, she became the ARA General Belgrano, named after Manuel Belgrano, one of Argentina's most celebrated independence heroes, a general, a statesman, and the creator of the Argentine flag, a much more broadly respected figure than her previous namesake. And under the name General Belgrano, she'd serve in the Argentine Navy for nearly 3 more decades. Now, during this period, the Argentine Navy carried out various upgrades and modifications to the ship. She received improvements to her anti-aircraft armament, updated electronics and fire control systems, and various other refits designed to keep her operationally relevant. The Argentines were serious about maintaining their fleet, and the Belgrano was a significant component of it. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, though, let's be honest, she was old. Built in the mid-1930s, she was approaching 50 years of age. For a warship, that is an extraordinary lifespan. Most warships have a much shorter service life. The Belgrano was the nautical equivalent of your grandfather still driving a 1952 Morris Minor and somehow making it work. But she was still there, still commissioned, still sailing. And then, in 1982, Argentina and Britain went to war over a small group of islands in the South Atlantic. The Falklands War and her final chapter. Right, let's talk about 1982, because this is where everything comes to a head. Argentina, under the military junta led by General Leopoldo Galtieri, invaded the Falkland Islands, which Argentina calls the Malvinas, on the April 2, 1982. This was, to put it diplomatically, a miscalculation of extraordinary proportions. The junta assumed Britain would not fight for a set of islands 8,000 miles away with a population of around 1,800 people and a lot of sheep. Guess they forgot about the Welsh, thought I would get that in before anyone else did in the UK. They assumed wrong. Thatcher responded with what can only be described as the full weight of British national irritation. A task force was assembled with remarkable speed. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, submarines, supply ships, requisitioned ocean liners converted to troop ships were all sent south. The UK armed forces had been tasked to reclaim those islands, and God help anyone who got in the way. Now, the Argentinian Navy had to respond to this. They had the General Belgrano. They had a brand new British-built aircraft carrier they'd purchased called the ARA 25 de Mayo, which on its own is a magnificent irony. They also had a collection of destroyers and submarines. On paper, this wasn't something to be sniffed at. However, in practice, the Royal Navy's nuclear submarines were already in the area, invisible and lethal, and that equation was always going to be uneven. Britain declared a total exclusion zone of 200 nautical miles around the Falklands, within which any Argentine vessel was fair game. Outside that zone, theoretically, ships were safer, theoretically. The General Belgrano, along with her 2 escorting destroyers, the ARA Bouchard and the ARA Piedra Buna, had been operating south of the exclusion zone. The Argentinian Naval Command had conceived of a pincer movement, the Belgrano group approaching from the south while the carrier 25 de Mayo group approached from the north. The idea was to attempt to catch the British task force between them. It was, in theory, a sensible tactical concept. In practice, it ran into several problems, the most significant of which was HMS Conqueror. HMS Conqueror was a Churchill-class nuclear-powered fleet submarine, and she had been tracking the Belgrano group for roughly 30 hours. 30 hours, the crew of the Belgrano had no idea. They were sailing through the South Atlantic in the freezing cold, running anti-submarine patrols with their escorts, and all the while, somewhere in the dark water beneath them, a British submarine was watching, waiting, and reporting their position back to command. On the 2nd of May 1982, the British War Cabinet, with Prime Minister Thatcher present, authorized HMS Conqueror to attack the General Belgrano. The rules of engagement were changed specifically to allow this, even though the Belgrano was outside the exclusion zone and had actually turned around and was heading away from the British force at the time of the attack. That last point became and remains deeply controversial in some areas. At approximately 1557 local time, HMS Conqueror fired 3 Mark 8 torpedoes at the General Belgrano. The Mark 8, I should note, was a torpedo that had been in service since 1927. The submarine firing it was nuclear-powered and among the most advanced vessels of its day. The target was a ship built in the 1930s. It's the kind of historical layering that should make your head spin a little. 2 of the 3 torpedoes struck home. The first hit the bow section, forward of the A turret. The second hit the stern. Both explosions were catastrophic. The forward hit killed men instantly in the mess decks and magazine areas. The second detonation blew off the entire stern section of the ship. Within 50 minutes, the General Belgrano, survivor of Pearl Harbor, veteran of the Pacific War, the pride of the Argentine fleet, was gone, sliding beneath the grey waters of the South Atlantic. And here is where I have to stop making jokes, because 323 Argentinian sailors died when the Belgrano sank. Many of them were young conscripts 18, 19 or 20 years old, who had been called up for their military service and found themselves in the middle of a shooting war they hadn't started and probably hadn't fully understood. The sinking of the Belgrano accounts for more than half of all Argentine military deaths in the entire Falklands War. The survival story is, in its own way, remarkable. Roughly 770 men survived, pulled into life rafts in sub-zero conditions, in heavy seas, in weather that would kill an unprotected person in hours. They drifted for 30 hours or more before Argentine ships located them. The rescue operation, conducted under terrible conditions, saved the majority of the survivors, but the cold and the sea claimed others even after the sinking itself. It is worth stating clearly, these were not combatants who had done anything wrong. They were sailors doing their duty, serving their country, following their orders. Whatever one thinks of the political decisions that started the Falklands War, or the military decisions that led to the Belgrano's sinking, the human cost was real. The families of those 323 men still remember. Argentina still remembers, and we should too. Now for the controversy. Was it legal, was it right, and the political aftermath? Let's get back to the controversy, because it genuinely matters and it's been debated ever since. The key facts, as best as they can be established: the Belgrano was outside the exclusion zone. She had turned around and was heading away from the British task force. The British government's position was that she remained a threat. An enemy cruiser with 15 6-inch guns in waters near British ships is a threat, regardless of which direction she's pointing. The rules of engagement had been specifically widened to allow attacks outside the zone precisely because of the concern about a pincer movement. The Argentinian government and many critics argued that sinking the Belgrano was an act of war outside declared parameters, and that she was no longer an active threat when she was hit. Some even argued it was deliberately timed to torpedo the peace negotiations that were ongoing at the time through Peruvian mediation. Thatcher, when challenged in a famous live television interview by a member of the public on a program called Nationwide, look it up, it is extraordinary television, she defended the decision robustly and did not blink. Her government's line never wavered. The Belgrano was a threat, and neutralizing her was militarily and legally justified under the laws of armed conflict. The debate has never fully been settled to everyone's satisfaction. It is one of those historical questions where the facts are largely agreed upon, but the interpretation remains fiercely contested decades later. What's not contested is the military effect. After the sinking of the Belgrano, the Argentinian surface fleet, which included that aircraft carrier, returned to port and stayed there for the rest of the war. The threat of British nuclear submarines had made the South Atlantic effectively impassable for Argentinian surface ships. The Argentine Navy never meaningfully challenged the British task force at sea again. So what do we make of the General Belgrano? What's the takeaway from this extraordinary story? First, there's the sheer improbability of her service life. This ship was built in the American Depression era, launched before World War II had begun, survived the attack that brought America into that war. She fought across the entire Pacific theater, won 11 battle stars, was sold to a South American country. She sailed under 2 different national flags, served for over 4 decades, and was finally sunk by a Cold War-era nuclear submarine using a torpedo design that was older than the ship itself. Second, there's what the sinking tells us about naval warfare in the modern era. The Belgrano's end demonstrated, absolutely conclusively, that surface ships in the age of nuclear submarines operate under a constant, invisible threat that cannot be easily countered. You can't hear a nuclear submarine running quiet in open ocean. You cannot see it. You can't easily find it. Your best defense is staying in port. In some ways, the Belgrano's sinking was the defining moment. It confirmed the true dominance of the hunter-killer submarine in post-war naval doctrine. Thirdly, and I think most importantly, it is a reminder of the human reality behind the hardware. We talk about tonnage, weapons caliber and torpedo specifications, the tactical decision-making, and that's all genuinely interesting, but 323 people died on that ship. Young men, mostly, people with families and futures and whole lives ahead of them. The General Belgrano is not just a fascinating historical footnote. She is a war grave. Her wreck lies somewhere in the South Atlantic, and 323 sailors are resting with her. Naval history is the study of machines and tactics and strategy, yes. But it is always, ultimately, the study of people. Before I let you go, a few absolutely extraordinary facts about this ship that I couldn't fit anywhere else. Number 1. HMS Conqueror, the submarine that sank the Belgrano, became the first nuclear-powered submarine in history to sink an enemy vessel in combat. That's a grim record, but a record nonetheless. Number 2. HMS Conqueror sailed back to Faslane, her home port in Scotland, flying the Jolly Roger. Yes, a nuclear submarine flying a pirate flag. This is an old Royal Navy submarine tradition that you can fly the Jolly Roger when you return from a successful war patrol, and it caused enormous political controversy at the time. Thatcher was reportedly not thrilled. The crew reportedly didn't particularly care. Number 3. The USS Phoenix, as we discussed, survived Pearl Harbor unscathed. Another Brooklyn-class sister ship, the USS Brooklyn herself, was also sold to a South American country, to Chile this time, and renamed the O'Higgins. The Brooklyn class really did get around. There's probably a documentary series in tracking what happened to all 7 of those ships. Number 4. There are still survivors alive today of the Belgrano sinking. Men who were teenagers in 1982, adrift in life rafts in the South Atlantic winter, who made it home. Their testimony is extraordinary and deeply moving, and if you ever get the chance to read or watch interviews with them, I strongly recommend it. History is always better when it comes from the people who lived it. And that's all we got for today on what you must agree is a very interesting service life. If you have enjoyed this, please hit the like button. A subscribe to the channel will help it grow, and hit the bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.